I'm Craig Nash, Senior Editor at Good Faith Media.
And I'm Hayoung Park, a social work and theology student.
We are co-hosts of the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast, where we explore and discuss the weekly biblical text and lessons found in Good Faith magazine.
We'll also share ideas for leading group discussions on each week's text and lesson.
Let's dive in. Today's passage is John's Easter story. It's in John 20, verses 1 through 19. Early on the first day of the week, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and saw that the stone had been removed from the tomb. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, "They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him." Then Peter and the other disciples set out and went toward the tomb. The two were running together, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. He bent down to look in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen wrappings lying there, and the cloth that had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen wrappings, but rolled up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who reached the tomb first, also went in and saw and believed. For as yet they did not understand the scripture that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples returned to their homes. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not touch me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her.
Nice.
That was a passage, I think I said it was 1 through 19. That was actually
18.
1 through 18.
Yeah.
We will pick up 19 next week.
We'll forgive you, Craig.
Thank you. Yes. So what are some of your...
Yeah. Well, I think first thoughts, John is probably my favorite gospel because he tells stories in just a way that I think it complements the way that I think. There's such drama and emotion in the characters he writes, and it's really easy for me to like kind of see myself as each of the characters throughout the book, and especially now, like the interaction that Mary has with Jesus is so emphatic, and I just love it. There's so many things, but all that to say, I think this story to me shows how important attention is in the ways that we express our faith and the way that we perceive God. I think there's a part of me that's like, well, if I see God, I should know it. Like, you'll know it when you see it, you'd think. But it literally says Jesus, she saw Jesus standing there, but did not realize it was Jesus. Yeah. Like it's clear as day. And so it's just a reminder that like often things having to do with the divine are so much more complex and require a lot of our energy and focus to be able to understand.
Yeah, it's kind of the story of life, actually. I was just thinking when you're saying that, in a lot of ways, it's like looking for your sunglasses that you have on top of your head.
Exactly.
On top of your head, and that's like perfect theme for, and we'll get into this when we talk about the lesson. It's kind of a literary theme of not noticing the things that are right in front of us. So for me, I'm just struck, and you talked about how John uses different characters and how we can see ourselves in each character. I'm just struck by the different ways that the news of Jesus's resurrection unfolded for each character in the scene and how they enacted that. Well, first of all, one of the things we have to talk about is John, who's the writer of this gospel. It's widely believed that he's the one that's kind of unnamed in the story and that he doesn't name himself. We have to talk about the funny part about
the race
of him, documenting who got there first. And so that's just kind of a funny story.
Even at the resurrection, they're going.
Yeah, exactly. And it does raise questions. Why did John include this? Was it an editorial mistake? Like it was his journals and he got most of it out, but he either like quote unquote accidentally left this part in, or maybe he actually did accidentally leave it in. It raises interesting questions about how these stories come to us. But also I'm just struck by, this way that the story unfolded for each character. Mary Magdalene was there first. She went to there's a lot of action in this scene. She went to go get the disciples. John and Peter come in. They peek in, and it says I can't remember if it's referring to Peter or John, believed. There's almost an immediate belief. And then right after that, the text says something like they
still do not understand.
They still do not understand. So there's this interesting belief and non-understanding right next to each other.
Yeah. What is belief,
Exactly, yeah. And then the action that I really just love how this unfolds is the men recognize and they leave. Mary Magdalene actually stays, and she's actually in some ways rewarded for sticking around and grieving. And she's rewarded with being the first to see the resurrected Jesus. And I love this idea of how there's so many different ways to see. And there's so many different ways to respond to what we see. And neither of those are right. Like both the male disciples were responding. What their impulse was we've got to go tell the others. Mary's impulse was, my Lord. She still has not quite grasped everything, but just her staying in the grief allowed her to see what none of the others got to see.
Yeah. And I also think it's so interesting that John is great at demonstrating all these different responses, and then he doesn't go and privilege one of them or puts one over the other, saying Mary was the best disciple or Simon Peter was, maybe except for the part about him being fastest.
Yeah,
but
exactly.
And I think that's helpful, and also a word of warning for those that are interpreting the text. It's really easy for us to be like, look at Mary, like she's doing this admirable.
Yeah, there's probably been any number of sermons, like elevating one or the other, and it's good. Yeah, that's great.
Right, we should resist doing things that the text itself does not do.
Just almost the text shows us that the point is not to rate, but to notice.
Yeah, love that.
So this week's lesson is written by Jennifer Garcia Bayshaw, and when we return, we will talk about what she has written.
I really liked this study and the way that Jennifer focuses on the role that perception and reception of God and just reality in general play in the whole story. We see Mary's perception change over the course of the story, and the whole study seems to kind of land on this point of, and I'll just read directly from it. It says, most important witnesses to God's work in the world are often the least likely candidates. And I think that was just thought-provoking to me. Where are the places in the story even that God is working that we're not willing to readily recognize and be that Mary figure?
Yeah. No, I love that. And I love being reminded of Mary Magdalene's place in church history as the apostle to the apostles. And this was, many of the people listening will know this. And I think in a previous study, we had a writer address this. In the ancient world, the female voice was not received as an authoritative voice. They weren't in a court of law. Their testimony would not have been received. They wouldn't even bother asking them to give a testimony. But we have a story here of a woman being the primary witness.
Right.
And I love how Jennifer landed on this idea of witness. I've spoken before about the work of Mike Stroop, who was a seminary professor for both of us. He has a book called Transcending Witness, and it's really kind of his work dismantles this idea of missions and evangelism, that our purpose as followers of Jesus is to tell a story and to convince someone to become a Christian or to convince someone about God's work in the world. But our role as followers of Jesus is just to bear witness, just to tell what we have experienced, what we have seen. And I just love that. And she also, and we'll talk about this in the next section, I love this idea of tokens, this ancient storytelling device that people often needed something. And for when we were talking off mic, you noted that for Mary, the token was hearing Jesus's
Mm.
voice.
Mhm.
We'll talk next week about Thomas, and his token was a physical
Yeah.
manifestation. And so it's just a reminder that we all need different things to see the work of God in our lives.
Yeah. And we'll be back in just a minute to talk about ways that we can discuss this in groups and Sunday schools. Before we discuss some ideas for leading a group through this week's text and lesson, we want you to know that we have created a leader's guide to help you prepare.
The Leader's Guide contains an overview of the lesson, some highlights to focus on, and several discussion questions for your group to go through.
For those questions, you can focus on one or all of them or any combination. Also, feel free to adapt them for your particular group's needs.
The Leader's Guide can be found at goodfaithmedia.org. So, there's any number of ways a group could approach this. One of the things I want to be mindful of, and I wrote this in our leader's guide that your leaders may have read. It's available to everyone online at goodfaithmedia.org. But one of the things we haven't mentioned is this is the Super Bowl Sunday of church Sundays.
Let's go.
This is Easter Sunday. I think it's important to note that, and just to acknowledge in your group that this is our story. Like, this is the story that everything else hinges on. And it's great to notice that. It's also great, kind of breaking the fourth wall of knowing about churches, is this is the Sunday where you're going to probably have the most high attended worship service, other than maybe Christmas Eve if you do a Christmas Eve service. But still, probably this is, for a Sunday morning, this is by far the big show. The flip side of that is there may be a smaller number of people in your classes, so you may have extra time to reminisce, to think, to don't let the moment pass you by, that this is a good opportunity to recognize Jesus. And I just think one possible thing to do is to share similar recognition stories that you've had of God's work in your life, and what was the token that you needed. We'll talk about in a couple of weeks, the road to Emmaus. And for me, the token I need is similar to theirs, which is a little bit of space to reflect. And so how about,
this is going a little off script, but one thing that is really striking me right now is, and I think I said this in a previous episode about the crucifixion story, but it is the fact that this is our Super Bowl. This is the thing that the Christian faith hinges on, the fact that Jesus has died and resurrected, and that we will follow in that. But it is also a very traumatic story. And I think, to your point, Craig, about Sunday school being this time where time is a little squishier and we can have a little bit more discussion, it might be important to press into that of it is our central thing, and it's okay to be still confused and have questions and realize how complex and in some ways nonsensical it is, while recognizing and embracing and celebrating all of that it is. I think that the more I wrap my mind around the crucifixion and resurrection, the more I'm just like, what is going on here? And it's always so freeing to have that space to just admit.
It's such a good point too, to think anyone who's lived any amount of time has experienced death. And we often read this story, we've walked into this Sunday knowing the end. That's kind of the practice of the church calendar, is kind of pretending like you don't know how the story ends, so that you can receive some sort of emotional thing. But we've all experienced death, and we all know, many listeners will have experienced the death of someone very, very close to them. And that in the days after that, everything's in a haze. You don't think correctly. You laugh sometimes when you're not supposed to be laughing, and you cry sometimes when you're not supposed to be crying. And a morning like this is similar to that, in that, you may have been you may have spent extra time getting your kids ready, getting ready for lunch afterwards. And so, it's good to acknowledge that this is a chaotic time, as it was for the people in the story.
Yeah. Shelley Rambo is a author that talks a lot about this specifically in the book of John and the trauma of the cross and how you see that play out in the story. So if you're interested, that would be the direction to go to. But I'd love to end on this note of this Thomas Merton's story that I was reminded of, seeing the way that Mary's attention transposed the entire interaction she had with Jesus from just being a gardener to being literally the Son of God, her teacher and savior. And it's Thomas Merton, and he's a contemporary monk, and he tells a story. And I'll just read the quote directly from him. It's from a selection of writing that he's done. In Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved these people, that they were mine and I theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world. Then it was as if I suddenly saw the secret beauty of their hearts, the depths of their hearts where neither sin nor desire nor self-knowledge can reach, the core of their reality, the person that each one is in God's eyes. And so I'll just leave you with that, knowing that recognition of Christ is this beautiful, complex thing that we are all invited into.
That's great. And it's also a good reminder, a good place to be reminded that Easter is not a Sunday, it's a season. And this is the first Sunday in the season of Easter. And so we're looking forward to going on this journey together. Next week, we'll look at what we have labeled the Doubting Thomas story, which will be another opportunity for us to experience God in unexpected places. And we will see you next week.
I'm Hayoung Park.
And I'm Craig Nash.
And you've been listening to the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast from Good Faith Media.
Our music comes from Pond 5.
Each weekly lesson can be found in Good Faith magazine.
You can also sign up to receive a free digital leader's guide.
Learn about how to receive both these resources at goodfaithmedia.org.
There you can find daily news and opinion, various podcasts from our Good Faith Media team and partners, and information about the initiatives that help guide our work.
So visit us at goodfaithmedia.org, and we'll be back next week with another installment of the Good Faith Bible Studies podcast.